Tom Miller yawned as he walked through the quiet halls of the Golden Valley power plant. The night shift was always boring, but it paid well. As the maintenance supervisor, his job was to make sure everything ran smoothly while the city slept. The clock showed 2:30 a.m., and the only sounds were the gentle hum of machinery and his footsteps on the metal floor. Then everything changed. A bright blue light filled the hallway, forcing Tom to shield his eyes. He felt a strange tingling sensation throughout his body, like thousands of tiny bubbles dancing on his skin. Before he could press his radio to call security, the floor beneath his feet disappeared. Tom floated in a beam of light, unable to move or speak. The power plant vanished, replaced by the inside of what looked like a giant crystal bowl. The light faded, and he dropped onto a soft, springy surface. "What the hell?" he muttered, pushing himself up. His eyes widened as he took in his surroundings. The bowl was actually a massive enclosure, at least the size of a football field. The walls sparkled like diamonds, rising hundreds of feet into the air before curving to form a dome. The floor felt like grass, but it was blue-green and seemed to glow slightly. He wasn't alone. About 30 other people were scattered around the enclosure, some sleeping on strange cushions, others gathered in small groups. They wore different clothes: business suits, factory uniforms, hospital scrubs, suggesting they'd been taken from various places. "Welcome to the zoo," a woman's voice said behind him. Tom turned to see a middle-aged man and woman watching him. The woman wore faded jeans and a brown jacket, while the man was dressed in overalls. "I'm Betty from Iowa, and this is Mike from Texas. We were picked up 3 days ago." "Zoo?" Tom asked, his mind struggling to process the situation. "What do you mean?" Mike pointed upward. Through the crystal dome, Tom could see stars, more stars than he'd ever seen on Earth. But what caught his attention were the giant figures moving outside. They were at least 15 feet tall, with bodies that seemed to glow from within, like living aurora borealis. "They're called the Bright Ones, at least that's what we call them," Betty explained. "They collect species from different planets for their menagerie." Tom watched as one of the aliens pressed its face against the dome, its glowing eyes studying them with the same interest someone might show while watching fish in an aquarium. "They think we're animals." "Pets, actually," Mike said with a bitter laugh. "Smart pets, like dogs or dolphins, but still just animals to them. They feed us, give us toys, and study how we behave." As if on cue, a section of the wall shimmered, and several objects floated through. There were balls, building blocks, and what looked like puzzle boxes. The aliens watched expectantly, waiting to see what their new pets would do. "Do they hurt us?" Tom asked, noticing how some people quickly grabbed the puzzle boxes, apparently playing along with their captors' expectations. "No," Betty answered. "They're actually very careful with us. But they don't listen when we try to talk to them. They think our speech is just mimicry, like parrots. They don't believe we're truly intelligent because we haven't mastered space travel yet." Tom walked to the wall, placing his hand against its smooth surface. Beyond their enclosure, he could see more crystal domes stretching into the distance. Each one contained different creatures, some resembling Earth animals, others completely alien. "How many of us are there?" "More every day," Mike said. "They seem to think we make great pets, easy to care for, entertaining to watch, and apparently we adapt well to captivity." He smiled, but there was a glint of defiance in his eyes. "At least, that's what they think." Tom noticed how Mike and Betty exchanged meaningful looks. There was something they weren't telling him, but he could sense it. Beneath the act of compliant captives, plans were being made. An alien approached their enclosure, its body rippling with colors as it dropped more toys through the wall. Tom picked up a puzzle box, pretending to be fascinated by it, but his mind was already racing, analyzing the enclosure's structure, noting the patterns in the alien's behavior. If these creatures thought humans would make good pets, they had a lot to learn about their new animals. A week had passed since Tom's arrival in the alien zoo. He sat on one of the glowing blue-green patches of artificial grass, watching the bright ones conduct their daily observations. 3 of the tall, luminescent beings stood outside the crystal dome, their bodies shifting through shades of green and blue as they took notes on strange floating screens. "They're studying our problem-solving skills today," Betty whispered, sitting down beside him. She held one of the alien puzzle boxes the bright ones had given them that morning. "Watch this." She deliberately struggled with the simple puzzle, eventually solving it after making several obvious mistakes. The aliens' colors shifted to a pleased yellow tone, and they dropped some treats through the wall, sweet fruit-like cubes that tasted like honey. "You're making them think we're dumber than we are," Tom said quietly, understanding dawning on his face. Betty nodded. Mike found out something interesting. "Come on." They walked to a far corner of the enclosure where Mike was sitting with a new arrival, a woman named Rose who had been a locksmith before her capture. They had arranged some puzzle blocks around themselves to look like they were playing, but their faces were serious. "Show him," Betty said to Mike. Mike held up one of the crystal blocks. Rose figured out something about their technology. "Tell him what you found." Rose took the block, holding it up to the artificial light. "These crystals aren't just decoration. They're like their version of circuit boards. Everything here, the walls, the doors, even their tools, they all work on crystal technology. And the best part," she tapped the block gently with her fingernail, creating a faint ring. "They respond to specific vibrations." Tom's eyes widened. "That's why they gave us these musical toys," he said, picking up what looked like a simple xylophone made of crystal bars. "Exactly," Rose said. "They think we just like making pretty sounds. But we've been mapping out which frequencies do what. Some of them make the crystal walls more flexible. Others interfere with their monitoring systems." "Watch the guards," Betty said. 2 bright ones were standing nearby, their bodies glowing with soft purple light. What the humans had learned was their equivalent of amusement. They were watching a group of children play with the musical toys, clearly entertained by what they saw as simple animals making random noise. "They've completely underestimated us," Mike said with a quiet smile. "They think because we don't have spaceships, we must be primitive. They don't realize we've already put humans on the moon, built computers, or split the atom." Tom leaned in closer. "How many people know about this?" "Most of us in this enclosure," Betty answered. "And we're not alone. See that woman in the blue dress over there, near the feeding station? She figured out how to use the marks on the crystal walls to send messages in Morse code. We've been communicating with humans in other enclosures." Tom watched as the woman casually ran her fingers along the wall, seemingly admiring its sparkle, but he could now see the pattern in her movements. Short taps and longer strokes, sending information to unseen allies. "There's hundreds of us across different enclosures," Mike explained. "Engineers, soldiers, teachers, builders, all sharing what they know. The bright ones think we're just being social when we gather in groups, but we're actually planning." Rose held up another crystal, this one slightly different from the others. "We've started collecting these from the toys they give us, if we can gather enough, and if my theory about their resonant frequencies is correct." She was interrupted by the arrival of a bright one at their section of the dome. The alien's body rippled with gentle colors as it dropped more toys through the wall, clearly pleased to see its pets playing together. Tom picked up a crystal block and pretended to be fascinated by its sparkle. Inside, his mind was racing with possibilities. The maintenance worker in him was already seeing patterns, power fluctuations in the crystal walls, variations in the light levels, the rhythm of guard changes. "So," he whispered once the alien moved away, "what's our next step?" Betty looked at each of them with determination. "We keep playing their game. Let them think they've domesticated us. Meanwhile, we learn everything we can about their technology." She smiled. After all, every zookeeper's worst nightmare is discovering their pets are smarter than they thought. The group nodded, then casually dispersed, each carrying their crystal toys. Tools that would soon serve a very different purpose than their captors intended. 2 weeks into their captivity, Tom made a breakthrough. He was examining the spot where the feeding station emerged from the crystal wall when he noticed something interesting. Every time the wall opened, there was a brief flicker in the lights overhead. "It's all connected," he muttered, pressing his hand against the warm crystal surface. Years of working at the power plant had taught him to spot patterns in power systems. These aliens might be advanced, but electricity was still electricity. Betty appeared at his side, pretending to clean up some leftover food cubes. "Found something," she whispered. "The whole station is one big circuit," Tom explained quietly. "These crystals don't just conduct energy. They store it. Like giant batteries." He pointed discreetly at the ceiling. "See those brighter spots? They're like junction boxes. When one part of the system draws power, it affects everything else." A bright one floated past their enclosure, its body glowing with soft pink, their color for contentment. The alien waved its long, luminescent arm, and several new humans appeared in the center of the enclosure in a flash of blue light. "They're bringing in more people," Betty observed. "Third time this week." "They're getting careless," Tom said. "Watch the lights when they use the transport beam." As the new arrivals stumbled to their feet, looking dazed, the lighting throughout the enclosure dimmed slightly. Tom smiled. "See that? The transport system needs huge amounts of power. It drains the whole network." Rose joined them, carrying some crystal musical toys. She'd been teaching other humans how different tones affected the crystal structures. "The new arrivals today include an electrician and a sound engineer," she said quietly. "Mike's talking to them now." Tom picked up one of the crystal chimes and struck it gently. The note rang out, and a tiny section of the wall briefly became cloudy. "Rose, can you teach more people your resonance tricks?" "I have an idea, but we'll need everyone's help." "Already on it," she replied. "We've got people in 6 other enclosures learning the tones. The bright ones think we're starting a musical culture. They're actually taking notes about our developing artistic expression." Betty suppressed a laugh. "They recorded us for 3 hours yesterday, just watching us play music. Their reports are probably full of observations about primitive humans discovering culture." Tom was about to respond when something caught his eye. One of the new arrivals, a tall man in a janitor's uniform, was examining the wall with unusual interest. Tom walked over casually. "The crystals are grown, not cut," the man said without looking up. "I used to work with industrial diamonds. These have the same kind of structure, but they're alive somehow. They respond to temperature changes too, not just sound." "I'm Tom," he said, offering his hand. "And you just confirmed something I've been suspecting." "What's your name?" "Bill," the man replied. "And I think I see what you're getting at. If these crystals are alive, they can be overloaded. Like any living thing, they have limits." A group of children ran past them, playing with the crystal toys, making them ring out in seemingly random patterns. But Tom had learned to recognize the Morse code hidden in their play. They were passing messages to the other enclosures. "The bright ones think they're being kind," Betty said, joining them. "Giving us toys, keeping us fed, studying our simple behaviors. But they've given us everything we need to understand their technology." Rose appeared with the sound engineer, who was already examining the musical crystals with professional interest. "The resonant frequencies are mathematical," she explained to him. "Once you know the pattern." They fell silent as 2 bright ones approached the dome. The aliens' bodies rippled with gold and pink colors, their way of showing satisfaction. They watched their human pets playing with the toys, making music, solving simple puzzles, completely unaware that their subjects were slowly decoding the very foundations of their technology. "Tonight," Tom whispered once the aliens moved away, "we'll test our theory. One small power surge, just to see how the system reacts." The others nodded, then dispersed, each returning to their assigned roles in their captor's elaborate zoo. But now, They moved with purpose, every action part of a larger plan. The bright ones had made a critical mistake. They had given their pets the keys to their own cage. They just didn't know it yet. Late at night, when most humans were supposed to be sleeping, Tom sat with a small group in the shadows of their enclosure. The bright ones had dimmed the lights, thinking their pets were resting. Instead, the humans were hard at work. "The test worked better than we expected," Tom whispered to the group. He held up one of the crystal chimes they'd modified. When we hit the right frequency, the power dropped in 3 different enclosures. Bill, the former janitor, nodded. "And I've been watching the guards. They didn't even notice. They thought it was just a normal power fluctuation." The small team had grown. Besides Tom, Betty, Mike, and Rose, they now had Bill's knowledge of crystals, an electrician named Dan, and a sound engineer called Paul. Each brought different skills to their plan. "Show them what we found today," Betty said to Paul. Paul took out a small crystal he'd been working with. "The bright ones use colors to communicate," he explained quietly. "But they also use sound frequencies we can't hear. Their crystal technology responds to these frequencies." He tapped the crystal gently, making it glow in different colors. "We've mapped out most of their basic commands," Rose added. "Stop, go, open, close. They're all just different frequencies. The colors are like confirmation signals." A soft tapping sound came from the wall. Everyone fell silent as Mike moved closer to listen. The children had taught everyone Morse code now, and messages flowed constantly between enclosures. "That's enclosure 7, Mike translated. They figured out how to interfere with the feeding station controls. And enclosure 4 says they can make their observation screens show false readings." Tom smiled. "Perfect. That means we now have 12 enclosures working together." "How many people total?" "About 400, Betty answered. "And more joining every day. The bright ones keep bringing in new humans, thinking they're expanding their collection. They're actually giving us more help." Dan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I think I figured out the power distribution system. These crystals work like a giant computer network. Each enclosure is like a node. If we can overload enough nodes at once." A bright one floated past their dome, its body glowing with gentle blue, their night patrol color. The humans quickly pretended to be sleeping, but the alien barely glanced at them. This had become routine to the creatures. Their pets were predictable and docile. Once the guard passed, Rose pulled out a crude map she'd drawn using crushed food cubes as ink. "We've got people in all the key positions now," she whispered. "Engineers in the north section, technicians in the east, and that group of physics teachers in enclosure 9 has almost cracked their transport beam technology. And the best part," Mike added with a quiet laugh, "the bright ones are so busy writing reports about our social behavior and primitive communication attempts that they don't realize we're building a resistance network right under their noses." Tom looked around at his team. In just a few weeks, they'd gone from confused captives to organized rebels. Humans from all walks of life were working together, using their different skills and knowledge to understand their captors' technology. "Tomorrow we start Phase 2, he said. "We'll need all enclosures to coordinate their crystal frequencies. One massive surge might be enough too." He stopped as another message tapped through the wall. Mike listened carefully, his eyes widening. "What is it?" Betty asked. "Enclosure 15, Mike said. "They'd just gotten new arrivals, 3 radio technicians and a computer programmer. And get this, the programmer says she recognizes patterns in the crystal network that match basic computer code." The group looked at each other with growing excitement. If the crystal network really was like a computer system, and they could understand its code. "Tell them to start working on it right away," Tom said. "We'll send them everything we've learned about the frequency patterns." As the humans dispersed to their sleeping spots, Tom watched another bright one float past. The alien's body glowed with soft pink, completely satisfied with its well-behaved pets. Soon, Tom thought, they would learn just how big a mistake they'd made. Humans weren't meant to be kept in cages, no matter how pretty those cages might be. The day of the uprising started like any other in the alien zoo. The bright ones made their morning rounds, their bodies glowing with peaceful golden colors as they observed their human pets. They had no idea what was about to happen. Tom checked his makeshift watch, a crystal that pulsed with the station's power cycles. 3 minutes, he whispered to Betty. Around them, humans were casually moving into position, each group knowing their exact role. In one corner, children played their crystal chimes, sending last-minute messages to other enclosures. Near the feeding station, Rose and Paul had gathered their modified crystals. Bill and Dan stood ready by the power junction points they'd discovered in the walls. 2 minutes, Tom counted down. Through the crystal dome, they could see the bright ones going about their normal routine. Some were taking notes, others were bringing food to different enclosures. One was even recording what it thought was a charming display of primitive human music. 1 minute. Betty squeezed Tom's arm. "Look at them," she said quietly. "All that advanced technology. And they never once thought their pets might understand how it works." 30 seconds. Mike moved to his position, carrying several crystal toys they'd modified. Around the enclosure, other humans did the same. The children stopped playing and quickly cleared the area. 10 seconds. Tom announced softly, "Remember, hit the exact frequency we practiced. 3 bursts, then wait for the power surge. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now," Tom commanded. In perfect synchronization, humans in all 12 connected enclosures struck their crystal chimes. The sound was beautiful and deadly to the crystal technology. The modified crystals amplified the frequency, sending shock waves through the entire network. The effect was immediate. The crystal walls began to pulse with strange colors. The bright ones outside froze, their bodies flickering with confused yellows and alarmed reds. Second burst. Tom shouted. Again, the crystals rang out. This time, the power junction points that Dan had identified began to overload. Sparks of energy danced across the dome. The bright ones were panicking now, their bodies flashing emergency colors. They rushed to their control panels, but nothing worked. The false readings Rose's team had programmed showed everything as normal. Final burst. The third wave of crystal frequencies hit the weakened system. With a sound like breaking glass, the power network began to fail. Emergency barriers started dropping randomly as the system tried to compensate for the overload. Phase 2. Tom yelled. Rose and Paul activated their modified feeding station crystals. Instead of its usual gentle opening, the wall shattered completely. Similar breaches appeared in other enclosures as humans used their understanding of the crystal technology to break free. The bright ones were in chaos, their bodies strobed with colors never seen before. Fear, confusion, disbelief. Some tried to activate the transport beam to remove their escaped pets, but the system was completely scrambled. "Stay in your groups," Betty called out as humans began pouring through the breaches. "Remember the plan." Teams of engineers and technicians ran for the control panels they'd studied through the crystal walls. Others headed for the transport beam controls, ready to apply what they'd learned about the alien technology. A bright one tried to stop a group of escaping humans. Bill struck a crystal at exactly the right frequency, and the alien's personal force field collapsed. It backed away, its body pulsing with shock and fear. "They never thought we'd figure it out," Mike said, helping guide people through their breach. "They gave us everything we needed to understand their technology, thinking we were just playing with toys." Tom watched as more enclosures began breaking open. Hundreds of humans were now free, moving with purpose and coordination that completely baffled their former captors. "Control room team with me," he shouted. "Betty, lead the second group to the transport section. Rose, get your people to the power core." The humans moved like a well-trained army, each person knowing their role in the plan they'd spent weeks perfecting. The bright ones could only watch as their carefully controlled zoo descended into calculated chaos. Their pets weren't just escaping. They were taking over the station. Tom led his team through the winding crystal corridors of the space station, following the power lines they'd mapped through their enclosure walls. Behind them, they could hear the chaos of the mass escape. Ahead lay their target, the station's main control room. "Look out!" Betty shouted. Two bright ones appeared around the corner, their bodies flashing angry red and orange. "Hit the resonance," Tom commanded. Rose and Paul struck their modified crystals in perfect harmony. The aliens' force fields flickered and died, leaving them defenseless. They backed away, their colors shifting to fearful purple. "The tables have turned," Mike said as the aliens retreated. "Now they're the ones afraid of us." The team reached the control room entrance, a massive crystal door pulsing with energy. Through its transparent surface, they could see more bright ones inside, frantically working at their stations. "Dan, Bill, you're up," Tom said. The electrician and former janitor placed their crystals at specific points on the door, just as they'd practiced with their enclosure walls. The crystals rang out in harmony, and cracks appeared in the door's structure. "They're trying to lock down the system," Rose warned, watching the power fluctuations in the crystal walls. "We need to hurry." "Everyone ready?" Tom asked. His team nodded. 3, 2, 1. They struck the final frequency. The crystal door shattered, spraying harmless shards across the floor. The bright ones inside spun around, their bodies strobing with alarm colors. "Take your positions," Tom shouted. The humans rushed in, each heading for their assigned stations. Months of studying the aliens' technology through their enclosure walls were about to pay off. Rose and Paul took the crystal communication array, their fingers dancing across the control surfaces as they sent messages to other human teams throughout the station. Betty and Mike secured the door, using modified crystals to create a barrier. The bright ones tried to interfere, but humans armed with crystal chimes kept them at bay. Without their force fields, the aliens were surprisingly helpless. They had relied on their technology for so long, they didn't know how to handle its failure. "Status reports coming in," Rose called out. "Betty's group has secured the transport room. They're shutting down all incoming teleports. Engineering team has reached the power core. They're stabilizing the system now." Tom watched the main display crystal, which showed the entire station. Dots of light represented different groups of humans, spreading through the facility like a coordinated army. The bright ones were retreating everywhere, completely overwhelmed by their former pet's unexpected uprising. "More good news," Hall announced. "The tech team in Section 7 has figured out how to access the station's database. Everything the bright ones know about their crystal technology. We can learn it all." A group of bright ones huddled in the corner, their bodies dim with fear and confusion. Tom approached them, holding up one of their own crystal tablets. "We can read your language now," he said clearly. "We learned it while you thought we were just making random marks on our enclosure walls. We want to talk." The aliens' colors shifted to a mix of disbelief and shock. One of them stepped forward, its body pulsing with a questioning blue tone. "Yes," Tom answered, understanding their color speech now. "We are intelligent. We understand technology. And we deserve to be treated as equals." "The other enclosures are asking for instructions," Rose reported. "What should I tell them?" Tom looked at the bright ones, then at his team of humans who had accomplished the impossible. "Tell them to treat our former captors well. No revenge. We're better than that. But make it clear, the station is under our control now." Through the control room's crystal walls, he could see more humans arriving, bringing with them bright ones who had surrendered. The aliens' perfect zoo had turned into something they never expected, a demonstration of humanity's greatest strengths: adaptability, cooperation, and determination. "Send one more message," Tom added. "Tell every human on this station, well done. We're free." 3 days after the uprising, Tom stood in the station's grand meeting hall, a vast chamber with crystal walls that stretched up into darkness. Around him, humans and bright ones worked together at various control stations, though now as equals rather than keeper and pets. The last of the force fields are down, Betty reported, approaching with a tablet made of crystal. All species have been freed from their enclosures. Through the massive viewing window, Tom could see transport ships arriving. The Bright Ones had finally called their leaders to handle this unprecedented situation, a complete takeover by what they had considered simple pets. "How are our guests doing?" Tom asked, referring to the other alien species they had freed. "Most have already left for their home worlds," Mike answered, joining them. "They're spreading the word about what happened here. The Bright One's reputation as superior beings is taking quite a hit." Rose hurried over, excitement clear on her face. "You need to see this," she said, leading them to a large crystal display. "We've finished translating their stellar maps. Look at all these inhabited worlds. And now we know how their faster-than-light travel works." Speaking of travel, Betty added, "The first human ships are on their way. Apparently, Earth's governments are very interested in talking to us after we sent that message about alien contact and advanced technology." Tom watched as a group of Bright Ones entered the hall, their bodies glowing with colors that he now recognized as shame and regret. They approached the human leaders, then did something unprecedented. They dimmed their lights completely, a sign of total submission. "We have made a grave error," the lead alien said, using the crystal translator they had developed together. "We judged your species by the wrong measures. We saw your lack of space travel as proof of low intelligence, while you saw our technology and learned to master it in weeks." "Everyone makes mistakes," Tom replied diplomatically. "The question is, what happens now?" The Bright One's body shifted to a hopeful shade of blue. "We propose a trade. We will share our crystal technology and star maps with Earth. In return, we ask to learn from humans." "Learn from us?" Mike asked, surprised. "Yes." The alien's colors rippled with sincerity. "Your species has something we lost long ago: creativity, adaptability, the ability to solve problems in new ways. Our technology made us complacent. We stopped growing." Bill walked up, carrying one of the modified crystal chimes they had used in their escape. "We've already started combining our knowledge with their technology," he said. "Look at this." He struck the crystal, creating a harmony they had never heard before. The walls responded with beautiful patterns of light and color. "That's amazing," Betty breathed. "Humans did this in days," the Bright One said, its body showing impressed colors. "You took our tools and found new ways to use them that we never imagined. We have much to learn from each other." Tom looked around the hall. Humans were teaching Bright Ones about creative problem-solving, while the aliens explained the deeper mysteries of their crystal technology. Former pets and keepers, working together to build something new. "The first Earth ships will dock in 1 hour," Rose announced. "They're bringing scientists, diplomats, and representatives from every major nation." "Tell them we're ready," Tom said. He turned to the Bright One leader. "We accept your proposal. Equal exchange of knowledge, equal respect between our species, and one more condition." "Name it." The alien's colors showed curiosity. "No more zoos. No more judging species by our standards alone. Every intelligent race deserves the chance to prove itself in its own way." The Bright One's body glowed with agreement colors. "We understand now. Intelligence comes in many forms. We will never make this mistake again." As Tom watched Earth's ships approach through the crystal windows, he couldn't help but smile. What had started as a terrifying abduction had led to humanity's first steps into a larger universe. They had entered as pets but would leave as equals, ready to take their place among the stars. "Not bad," Betty said beside him, "for a bunch of primitive pets." "Just proves what I've always said," Tom replied with a grin. "Never underestimate humans. We're full of surprises."